Hey everyone, it's Ragan from Fox in the City. I am venturing out in the YouTubeverse and starting to produce more video content. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking about racism in the context of Big Brother, a show that I was on 10 years ago. The video version of Fox in the City is going to come out every week on Fridays now, and I'll be talking about what's ever on my mind, whatever bee is in my bonnet currently. If you like what you hear, make sure you like the video, you share, and you subscribe. You know the drill. When I say that Big Brother has a structural racism problem, what do I mean? First, it's important to distinguish between individual racism and structural racism. Touré and Hamilton make this distinction in their book Black Power: The Politics of Liberation in America. And individual racism is the type of racism that more often than not we're programmed to point out. And individual racism is when an individual white person, for instance, does or says something racist to a person of color. So for instance, on season 15 of Big Brother, which is notoriously the most racist season of Big Brother, you had a woman on the show named Erin. And Erin referred to a Korean player named Helen as Asian eyes and told her to go make some rice. Erin also racially antagonized a black woman named Candace. She rolled her shoulders back and mimicked black speech patterns, saying, "What you gonna do, girl? Where's your class?"
Came in here and they flipped the mattress and threw all the pillows on the floor. So do it again, Erin.
What you gonna do, girl? What you gonna do, class girl? Where's your class?
What you gonna say? What you gonna say? Get in my face. What you gonna say? What you gonna say? What you gonna say? You want the black to come out?
What you gonna say?
So this would be an example of an individual act of racial aggression. So what is structural racism? Structural racism characterizes how racism is often baked into the structures of how we communicate and the institutions in which we're embedded. Take, for example, marijuana possession. Black and white people smoke marijuana at relatively the same rates, but black people are 4 times more likely to be imprisoned for small amounts of marijuana possession. What does that tell us? Well, it tells us that the criminal justice system is not quote-unquote blind. What reality TV producers tend to do is cast overwhelmingly white people in a cast, including people of color, without addressing the racism that they face within the context of a reality competition show, seems insincere. On Big Brother, for instance, oftentimes when a person of color is narrating some type of racial antagonism that they've encountered, it tends to be racial injustice that they've experienced outside the house, outside of the game, and not inside the Big Brother house.
He had a criminal record.
Mm-hmm. They did it with George Floyd.
Yeah.
You're pulling up the criminal
You
record.
get to die.
Person that is dead.
Right.
To justify why they were killed.
Time after time, CBS will refuse to show racism that's occurred inside the Big Brother house. A perfect example of this would be during season 11. During season 11, there was a guy named Braden, and Braden got into a fight with a Latina woman named Lydia and a black and Japanese guy named Kevin. And during the fight, he called them beaners and said that he was white and he was an American, and said a lot of other things. Like he said to Kevin, who is gay, that he needs to go stick a banana up his ass. And when CBS aired the fight, that backyard fight, during the Thursday live show, they strategically cut out all of the racist, homophobic things that Braden said, and instead made the argument seem like it was just some garden variety dispute between 2 or 3 people who weren't getting along. That wasn't the case at all.
It amazes me how short some of the memory spans in here are, because my opponent here called both of my very good friends. Yes, he did. And so a vote for Braden is a vote for a bigot.
That just points to a larger pattern of Big Brother's production team erasing racism and homophobia that minoritized players experience inside the Big Brother house. The racism on season 15, 4 years later, became so pronounced that when it wasn't addressed after the first 2 weeks, Big Brother's live feed viewers created an online petition, and 27,000 fans of the show signed the petition, and Big Brother finally decided to make racism inside the house one of the dominant storylines of the season. Once racism became a storyline, Big Brother opened every show with the following disclaimer. Big Brother is a reality show about a group of people who have no privacy 24/7. At times, the house guests may reveal prejudices and other beliefs that CBS does not condone. Views or opinions expressed by a house guest are those of the individual speaking and do not represent the view or opinions of CBS. Now, what this disclaimer does is it strategically positions CBS as being innocent or not complicit in any racism that's being experienced in the house, which is kind of laughable when you consider that during season 15, the white player that they had narrate the racism that had been taking place all season is a woman named Amanda Zuckerman, who was one of the most demonstrably racist people in the house.
Being accused to be racist, it's a serious, serious deal.
Taking like 14 Puerto Rican showers. Oh, I'm racist, I'm racist. No, it's that Puerto Ricans are smelly and then they play back. I'm like the least racist person.
Kermit the Frog.
That's why Candace came here, because she wanted to make sure, because again, she pulled the fucking racist card again.
And she wore my fucking headband and didn't ask. She took it off your fucking head and put on her greasy ass nappy hair head.
But this is who the production team decided would be the best positioned player to narrate Aaron and Gina Marie's racism. That in itself, that choice is implicitly racist. Nowhere do we see the implications of racism on gameplay more apparent than in season 22, the current season of Big Brother All-Stars 2. The cast of Big Brother 22 includes 5 people of color and 11 white house guests. And of those 11 white house guests, only 2 had a history of reaching out and playing with players of color in their original season. So what happens when you cast 11 white people in a single season of Big Brother, 9 of whom have no history playing with people of color in their initial seasons? Well, what happens is a phenomenon called white racial bonding, which characterizes the linguistic and behavioral tendency for white people to form communicative bonds with one another. Sleater argues that one may tend to think only of this bonding in large-scale virulent racism, such as the KKK or other racial pride groups. And only understanding white racial bonding from that limited perspective, one misses the opportunity to understand everyday racism and the bonding of those implicated by whiteness. If you look at the first 9 weeks of nominations in the Big Brother house, you see the implications of white racial bonding. 14 out of the first 18 players nominated over the course of 9 weeks were people of color. You see the tendency for an exclusively white group of heads of household to target people of color. It's especially important to discuss white racial bonding on Big Brother on All Stars because in a typical season of Big Brother, the production team can lean back and say, hey, we had no idea this would happen. We just cast the people who we thought would be best for the show, and then Aaron said something racist, or Gina Marie said something racist, or Amanda said something racist. What makes an all-star season, or a season that's composed entirely of returning players, different is that history is the best predictor of the future. So when the production team sat around a table and decided who they were going to extend invitations to return to the game, they realized that 9 of the 11 players they were inviting back don't form alliances, don't form close bonds with players of color. I'm not making this video because I hate Big Brother or I have a bone to pick when it comes to the production team. I'm making this video because I earnestly love the game of Big Brother. I think it's a fascinating opportunity for people from different walks of life to get together and engage in a game of social chess. But the problem with the social chess metaphor is that it implies that there's an equal playing field, that two different players come together and the best player wins at the end of the day. The social chess metaphor doesn't acknowledge the ways that minoritized players like gay people, lesbians, transgender individuals, or people of color come into the game at a distinct disadvantage, and white players come in with a lot of unearned privilege. So instead of thinking of Big Brother as a social game, it may be more productive to think of Big Brother as a video game, where white people are playing on easy mode, and people of color and sexual minorities are playing on expert or hard mode. So my hope is that the production team will finally start to acknowledge that racism is not just embedded in a gal from Texas who doesn't understand why the things she's saying are racist. But instead, racism is also something that they're complicit in. And maybe with that knowledge, they'll do better in future seasons. At least that's my hope. So if you like what you heard today, if you agree with it, if you disagree with it, let me know in the comments. And definitely, if you like what you hear, like, share, and subscribe.